today's episode of the Era of AI, we'll be taking a deep dive into how the AI landscape is permeating the financial services industry. We've had a significant amount of volatility recently. Now imagine if AI was able to predict those market shifts even before they happened. You might then ask yourself, what about the role of the financial advisor? Well, AI is reshaping that too. Let's hear more from our guest, Sandy Kaul, Head of Innovation at Franklin Templeton. Sandy, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's lovely to be here.
This is one of those topics that we have seen kind of build and questions arise, and it's almost as if we say, is AI going to be replacing people in almost every industry, but particularly this industry, financial services, where we know that that human relationship that an advisor has with his or her client is really special and very important. Yep. So the question is, where do you see AI's role in the financial services industry, in investing, as this train continues down the tracks?
Yeah, so I think that the analogy we like to use, Anthony, is co-pilot, right? So if you think about the new cars that you buy, right? You can talk to your car, it can make phone calls for you as you're driving. If you start to veer out of your lane, it will give you a little nudge to push you back into your lane. It gives you a little flashing light if you're about to make a turn and there's someone in your blind spot. These are super helpful cues, right? This makes you a safer driver. It makes you a more effective driver. You can have more confidence on the road. And this is exactly how we see AI really starting to be the tool that is going to help financial advisors really be able to, number one, service their clients better, but number two, also scale the number of services of clients that they can service at a very deep level of relationship building, because they're going to have all this support at their fingertips.
From a simplistic level, the question I would ask you is it essentially a digital administrative assistant in some ways, where it takes some of that admin work off of the plate of the FA and the team and allows them to have more human interaction, like you said, to build those relationships and even build more relationships?
I would say what's interesting about AI is it can have multiple personas. Right. So one persona is absolutely, a great administrative assistant that puts everything in front of you, even a second or two before you think you might ask for it. But what's also really, I think, exciting is that it's also your mentor. It's also your subject matter expert. So if I have a question about how is this tariff volatility, my clients are very nervous, what is the average recovery time from a market downturn of this magnitude? Typically, in what number of months do we get back to seeing new highs? Right? Now, that's a piece of research that might take somebody a few days at least to go and do and think about. An AI assistant could give you that information as you are having the conversation with the client. And that makes you sound so smart, and it gives the value of the advice that you're giving even more weight to the client, because the message you're giving them is then reinforced by the data that you can pull up at your fingertips, even though you did not know that data 3 seconds before.
Right. It's incredible how fast it can actually generate, most of the time, really, really solid results.
That's right.
So when we think about the portfolio management side of our business and working with our clients, what capabilities are you seeing that you're really excited about for the future that will really help with those relationships?
The big AI and the generative AI, right? The really being able to get in and use the language skills of these AI tools. But that's coming on top of big data. That's coming on top of tools that we've actually been using for many years. Like, AI is not new. We've really been using AI in the industry for over a decade now, because we've started bringing in, remember, all this alternative data. We started looking at satellite data, video content, and all of this began to feed into our investment models. That was early AI. Now what the difference has been is that the AI itself is starting to really bring in the language around that. It's not just the analysis now, it's the analysis and the communication.
Right.
And that's why this has been such an important and really very revolutionary a step forward for the industry.
Yeah, and I'm glad you reminded our audience and me that this is not new, that
Right.
AI has been around in different forms, including how we watch television on our streaming platforms. It's been
Yeah.
suggesting TV shows and movies for me for a long time. That's also AI. What I loved about that chart that we brought up is talking about how these managers, 54% of them say they're already using AI when they're thinking about strategies and doing their research. And the ones that say no are still considering it down the road. I think that's a really tangible and important aspect to think about when we think about how useful it is. It's already being used.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think we have another chart that actually talks about how they're using it. It really talks about, just what you're talking about, right? That we're using it to consolidate all of the news and analyst reports and investor calls and summaries so that you don't have to spend, or your team does not have to spend time going through that material. You can get to the salient points almost immediately. They're using it to really do back testing and scenario analysis and risk assessment that might take you time to run even one of those summaries, but we're able to run them all simultaneously. And what they're also using it for is to deep dive into your own trading performance as a portfolio manager and really start to uncover, we all have personal biases because we're human.
That's right.
Right? And so it is helping us to surface where might my bias come into play. Maybe I'm a little too conservative when I'm putting on a brand new position. And maybe if I put on a bigger position, when I take that first bet, I would actually be able to increase my overall returns on that trade.
Right.
So it's giving us these kinds of prompts that, again, to go back to the co-pilot idea, it's like if you had your most trusted best friend and the person who knew you the best, but was also brilliant and could give you any information you needed sitting right next to you.
Yeah, it's almost like having access to an entire library of books and just soaking it all up in 3 seconds.
Yes.
Like you said, instead of sometimes maybe it takes days or even weeks to do all of that research that ChatGPT, for example, could spit out in a few seconds.
Exactly.
It's unreal.
But the one thing I will say that it is not doing, right, and I think we have a bar chart that shows some growth, we're not seeing broad, huge scale adoption of it taking over the entire portfolio for you. Right now, this chart looks like it's growing a lot when you look at the size of the bars coming up, but when you look at the total number, it's actually very, very small. What we have found is that it's not, there's too much uncertainty when you do not have a human in the process. When you let the AI select all the trades, put on the trades, manage the portfolio, determine the exits, what we're finding is the actions become unexplainable. And no financial advisor wants to be putting their client into a product where they can't explain why the strategy acted in the way it did.
Right.
And so I think that we still have a ways to go. This growth is happening, but it's happening at very small numbers, right? And so I think this is, again, a point not to worry because there's still an element of judgment, and AIs don't have judgment, right? And I think that is why we're going to always have humans in this process.
Right, exactly. And I think if my advisor came to me and said, "Oh, this was a purely AI-driven portfolio reconstruction that we did for you," I would have a lot of skepticism about, is this the right choice for me personally? You know me personally. We've had lunch together.
That's right.
You don't know, the computer doesn't know me the way you do. So I think that also kind of takes us to that kind of part of the story where we say this really does, by removing that portion of it and having AI be the co-pilot, not the autopilot, that's what enhances that human relationship between the advisor and their client.
That's right.
Right. Now, what about the whole aspect of hallucinations? We've all heard about AI, and it can pull from data that may not be factual. We know that there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, whether it's someone's personal tweets, et cetera.
That's right.
So where do we know it's getting information from? How do we deal with the fact that hallucinations exist, particularly in this industry?
That's right. Well, what's, I think, a real point of comfort that people should take is that organizations like UBS are extremely, extremely careful with the data that they allow any application, including AI, to access in their organization. And so, a lot of the hallucinations come because the data is inconsistent or the data is mistaken that is being ingested by the algorithms. And what is really important to understand is organizations like UBS have entire teams of people that do nothing but ensure the cleanliness and the reliability of that data. And it's like garbage in, garbage out. But when you have quality inputs, you get a much higher percentage of quality outputs and much less concern. But again, this is where having judgment and the human in the process is a great double check, because if let's just go back to our tariff question. If I say, how many trading sessions does it typically take, for the market to recover to new highs after you've seen a big sell-off like this? And if the AI comes back and says 3,000 years, well, I think you kind of know that that's a bad data point.
Right.
And I don't think an advisor would really, pass that information through to their client.
They'd probably question that themselves.
They'd probably question that themselves. So this is, again, why, even on that off chance that just who knows how some of these AIs work, and the off chance it does go off into some weird little bubble, right? That's where human judgment comes back in. And this is, again, why we're never replacing people when it comes to matters of trust. And what more important than trusting people around your money, right?
That's right. One of the most sensitive topics that anyone can talk about is money, right? I mean, we all know that. So, you want to make sure you have a very trusted relationship with that human being who's managing your portfolio. And by the way, thank you for kind of putting into this conversation the fact that we do have lots of checks and balances on our side. I'm sure, Franklin Templeton, I know, does as well. And that's one of the beauties of having really intelligent data entry and monitoring people to make sure that there aren't these hallucinations that are going to give misinformation to our advisors and clients.
It's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandy, Kaul, thank you so much. Great to have you. It's a great conversation, and one that I know that will continue to evolve over time. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
Great. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. There's lots more information on all these AI and technology-related topics at our website, ubs.com/AI-hub. It's right there on your screen, so make sure to follow that for some of our past shows and some other articles and interesting pieces of information on this topic. And make sure to follow UBS on our social media platforms that we're part of, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. You can follow us at UBS Trending. Lots of content there that you're not going to find anywhere else. And as always, if you have any questions about your portfolio, make sure you're speaking with your financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great day, everybody.